Set. I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's October 28th, 2024. It's 7:37, and we're in the Aldermanic Chamber in City Hall. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Let's see. This is a full board, right?
No,
Right here, the
just
budget. Okay. Alderman Tim Senate. Alderman Derek Theobald.
Here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Your favorite clerk, Alderman Mike O'Brien, is present. And Chairman Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present. Okay, we have a quorum. Also in attendance, we have Steve Buxton, Fire Chief here in Nashua. Matt Sullivan's on Zoom, and Director Tim Cummings is with us as well.
Other Alderman?
Yeah, I'm here.
That's other.
And we have a full board of aldermen other than Alderman Moran.
Yes, and it's going to take me a while, but we'll go down the list. So we have Alderman Kelly, but Alderman Clay. And we have Alderman Derek Thibodeau, but we have Alderman Jetty. We have Alderman Senate, but he's on budget, so Alderman Clements. Alderman Sullivan's on budget. Alderman Lopez is
Yes,
present. Alderman Gavea is also present. Alderman Thibodeau
He's on budget.
Yes.
is also present. Alderman Timmons. And you're already on budget. No, you're not. Okay,
Get everybody
just
covered.
to make sure, Aldermans, Clee, Jetty, Clemens, Lopez, Gaveva, Thibodeau, and Timmons. Did I get everybody?
Wilshire. I'm on budget. Oh, she's on budget.
She's on budget. Okay,
All right, first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone who wishes to provide public comment on anything on the agenda this evening?
Paula Johnson, Nashua, New Hampshire. I just was talking to Mr. Griffin regarding the C-1, and he's going to explain about this 263, but how I'm interpreting in it and how he might explain it might be two different things, how I'm reading this. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I'm not stupid either in how I comprehend things. So I'm kind of curious how this is going to be explained because it's not how it's read. I think I've said enough on the other one. I'm not talking about crumbling walls in a parking garage, which isn't happening right now. I think that we really need to figure out how we're going to keep this from happening again long-term with Stello Stadium, so we never have to deprive our students, these kids, not being able to play sports, which for some of them is the most important thing in their life. They achieve the best sometimes, and that reflects in school too, when their self-esteem is high. So, and then I might want to comment after about this towards the end of the meeting. Thank you.
We'll have a second public comment period. Any other public comment? Name and address for the record.
Hi, Amber Morgan, 20 Lock Street, Nashua. I'm here to speak in favor of the establishment of the trust fund for the development and ongoing maintenance of the Millyard Dog Park. 4 years ago, we began this journey of establishing a downtown dog park, and since then, We have successfully completed a feasibility study, identified and secured the land that will be the future location of Nashua's downtown dog park. But since I began this journey years ago, I did make it clear to most of the aldermen in this room, we have a few new faces, that we would raise the funds for the development and ongoing maintenance. However, we haven't had a mechanism to actually accept those funds. So establishing this trust fund would immediately enable the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Committee to begin fundraising activities and accept those donations. Dog parks are the fastest growing municipal feature in Nashua, leaving its current and future residents behind. Just alone in the last decade, ownership has risen up over 26%, and 18 to 36-year-olds do cite a better yard for their dog as one of the top reasons that they move. There is a lot of excitement and support of this, and this is from citizens, and it doesn't need to fall completely on the city. As we've been hearing, you have a lot of other things to spend money on. So we do owe it to our citizens, human and canine alike, to establish a dog park, and improving this trust fund is the next step in making that happen. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak in public comment? Seeing no one, we'll move on. Communications?
There are none.
This evening, we're going to have a discussion. It was requested by Chief Buxton to be able to share a few minutes with us on a topic relative to the repair cost on a damaged fire truck. Chief? We do have a, you want to sit and be more comfortable?
No, I think this will be all right,
Okay.
as long as everybody can hear me. Steve
Are you
Buxton,
looking for
Fire
a
Chief,
quick
City of
exit?
Nashua. Yep, there you go. So the purpose of tonight's discussion is to bring you up to speed on a situation that we have developed over at the fire department. Back in March, the operator of Ladder 3 was running up our aerial truck down the south end, and the aerial came in proximity to the primary wires and developed an arc in between the wires and the apparatus. Due to the action of the operator, the arc was broken. No injuries occurred to any of our personnel. However, it was theorized at the time that significant damage had taken place to the apparatus. Ladder 3 is a 2021 Pierce Aerial XT, 105-foot aerial device. It's assigned to Station 3, which is on Spitbrook Road. Back in 2021, when we purchased the truck, the cost to the city was $1.4 million. If we were to purchase that truck today, it would cost approximately $2 million with a delivery time of better than 48 months. The actions that we've taken since this incident occurred, we had an internal after-action review within our organization involving a representative from Eversource as well as the risk department. Through this collaborative review with Eversource, we adjusted some of our operations, and they provided us with some education for all of our members. The apparatus was immediately placed out of service and began to be evaluated by Pierce Manufacturing and their engineers. And in late September, we received the first and final estimate for the repair of the apparatus, which is approximately $790,000. The timeline for the repairs to take place on this apparatus would be approximately 4 months. We recognize that this is an unanticipated cost for the city. We've been working with the mayor's office, risk, and administrative services to facilitate funding for the project, and legislation is currently being drafted up to come before you shortly. Current timelines, once we get the approval to move forward, if we get the approval to move forward, if we were to achieve that in late November, early December, to give them the go-ahead, we could expect to see the apparatus return to the city in late spring of 2025. So as I said, the intent of tonight's discussion was to put this on everybody's radar, give you the appropriate time for consideration so we can answer any of your questions or concerns that may arise prior to requesting formal funding for this. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions if you would like me to.
Questions, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Buxton, for coming out tonight. I'm happy to hear that nobody got hurt. But my question around Ladder 3, that's in my part of town, Spitbrook Road, what's the contingency? What truck are you using while this one's down?
So National Fire Rescue maintains 4 aerial apparatus, and we actually have 9 engines. On the front line, we have 6 engines and 3 aerial apparatus. So basically, we have 1 in reserve that we utilize for when we do PMs to the apparatus, accidents, or situations like this. So currently, all hands are on deck. There is a ladder truck down in that part of town. However, unfortunately, when we have to do a PM or we have a breakdown, we have been dropping down to 2 apparatus. The original forecast to get these repairs done was more in the 16 to 18 month timeline. So we started looking around for used apparatus to perhaps purchase and put in our fleet to fill that void. But with the shorter timeline, we feel we'll be able to sneak by. It's
Okay.
not ideal, but we can get by.
Right. Accidents happen. Thank you. Thanks.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Do we have, I know it sounds like a silly question, insurance on these vehicles?
Yes,
Okay.
we've been working with the risk department, and they do have insurance on these vehicles. I believe there is a cap on it, and this isn't something that happens all the time. So I would guess I would have to defer that to Jen DeShays in the risk department to answer how that all works.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Chief, I know the answer, so it's kind of a loaded question, but in my experience with aerial ladders, they're like Faraday's boxes, they were just on the rubber. But with the outriggers that go right down to the ground, you're completing the circuit. I'm glad nobody got hurt. I mean, I'm glad nobody got killed. And the thing is, Chief, am I correct in assuming that the ladder does not necessarily have to hit that power line? It can arc if it's enclosed. And I know I fought a couple of fires that they were, Batesville Casket was the ones where they were worried about us because the darn thing nearly arced on us a couple of times. If what I state is correct.
Yeah, you would be correct. Actually, in this incident, all parties agree that the aerial device did not come into contact with the wires itself. The weather conditions on that day are considered to be a contributing factor, and that was what some of the education they provided to us were. Basically, you know, with the weather conditions, you have to take into account of the maximum approachable distance to the wires. And so this arc did actually jump from the wires to the aerial device. There was no contact made.
Very good, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. Unfinished business?
There are none. Yeah.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, we have new business resolutions, Mr. Chairman. Before us this evening is R-24-091. Approving the cost items of a sidebar agreement between the Nashua Board of Police Commissioners and UFPO Local 645 professional employees of the Nashua Police Department regarding additional 2 new positions. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R-24-091, and I will be speaking to it. The chief called me this afternoon. This is basically a paperwork item. Some time ago, we passed these 2 positions as official. Unfortunately, they didn't take these 2 positions and put them on the actual contract. So that's what this legislation is. It just adds these 2 positions that have already been authorized onto the contract. So it's a paperwork issue. Are there any questions? All right. Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, also for us this evening is R-24-093, establishing a community energy benefit rate expendable trust fund, funded by appropriations for the purpose of funding community energy projects. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend the final passage of R 24-093, and I see we have a couple of people here that'd like to speak to it, I believe.
Hello, I'm Doria Brown, the city's energy manager. I'm here to talk about the expendable trust fund for the community power benefit rate. So how many people here know what community power is? That's amazing. See, like 2 years ago, it was a lot different. So we have been operating a community power program for the last year and a half. And this past summer rate schedule, we added a 0.2 cent adder to our products. So we have the Granite Basic Rate, the National Community Benefit Fund, and then some opt-up options that are, I think, 30%, 50%, and 100% renewable energy. So our default rate now is the National Community Benefit Rate, and that is the rate with the 0.2 cent adder. So 0.2 cent, it doesn't seem like that much money. For the average electricity user in Nashua, it's about 80 cents a month. But in our first month of operating the community benefit rate, we have accumulated about $30,000 just in the month of August. And in order to take these funds and use them for projects, we need this expendable trust to be born so that we can accept that money. And that's the spiel.
Questions? Alderman Clements?
Yes, could this money be used for various projects, meaning, for example, the hydro dam or the landfill collection of the methane production, things that we already have in addition to if we wanted to add solar panels, things like that? Is that sort of the idea behind this?
So that is a portion of the idea behind this, to be able to use this for electric generation for the community. Other things that we can use this money for include energy efficiency projects for people's homes. For example, an additional rebate for heat pumps. We can also add an additional rebate for weatherization programs. Just things that can decrease the energy burden for our residents and just make those electric bills a little bit easier to pay.
All set?
Yep, thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. To Alderman Clemens' point, though, I know we have to install a fish ladder at the hydro. More specifically, can we use some of this money towards that?
So
I know it's a federal regulation,
yep.
from what I understand.
I think after the fund is created, we'll be able to have more conversations about how the money can be used. Okay. So there's no regulation barring that use, but since the money is being accumulated from electric ratepayers, it might make more sense for naturally that money to go towards making the ratepayers have some sort of a savings.
Okay. Just a follow-up.
Follow-up, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Who deems what the community energy projects are? How does that get determined?
Yep, that's a good question. So we will be working on this in the aggregation committee. We also have an aggregation committee meeting coming up on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. in room 208.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, seeing
Thank you.
none. Thank you. All right. Okay, so the motion on the floor is the final passage of R 24-093. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R-24-094, relative to the acceptance and appropriation of $617,000 from the State of New Hampshire Department of Transportation, FTA Section 5339 funds, and $130,500 from the State of New Hampshire Department of Transportation State Federal Year 2025 capital match funds into the transit grant activity transit capital project. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24-094. Director Sullivan?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I believe I already reviewed the fundamental components of this resolution before you this evening. Again, it represents two related but independent asks for authorization to accept funding to support both bus overhaul, van rehab, and some other minor capital projects, including but not limited to bus shelter replacement throughout the city. Again, these monies are going to be matched not only by federal monies, but also by local city dollars that are allocated through the capital planning process. But happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. I will just note for the record that there have been some questions about the way that we select different types of fleet for purchase. I know that's certainly something that's going to be discussed as part of the Finance Committee process when these vehicles are actually secured. I will just point out that the buses being overhauled as part of this program would be CNG buses or hybrid buses. At least one of the vans to be purchased will be a CNG van, and we are still determining the fuel typology of the remaining vans, but I expect there'll be some discussion at the committee level, and I'm happy to answer any questions related thereto this evening.
Questions? Alderman Lopez?
Just as a point of order, because we've had so many meetings tonight, both Director Sullivan and I think an earlier speaker mentioned they already spoke to. So I don't know whether this is going to be put out as a separate video from the Special Board of Aldermen public hearing. I just wanted to comment that if at some point somebody's watching this and they're like, when was it talked about? It's because there was a preceding meeting to this one.
Yes. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Through the chairman to Director Sullivan. I had the pleasure years back to go to a project with BAE Systems on the electric bus. And you couldn't really tell, you know, to me. It worked fine, it was comfortable, it had better handicap seating for the people that so need it and everything else like that. Are we looking at something along those lines in the future?
Director Sullivan?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So Alderman O'Brien, those are definitely some of the pride of our fleet. Those are our hybrid electric BAE propulsion system buses. Just a point of clarification, we're not looking to actually replace any of the buses with these two grants that we're receiving. We are replacing the vans, some of the smaller vehicles that you see riding around with the NTS yellow and blue branding. But what we will be doing, Alderman O'Brien, is actually doing rehab work to two of the buses. We haven't identified which specific vehicles those will be, but they're unlikely to be those BAE buses. Those will require overhaul at some point in time, but those are not planned for the immediate overhaul contemplated with this funding.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Through you to Director Sullivan, I was happy to see that some of the bus shelters are getting fixed up here. I think there are a few that really need it. If Director Sullivan could just explain just real big picture, because where I'm struggling here is, are the matching funds, meaning does the city need to take what we're getting and then match it with local appropriations in order to do all of these projects? So if you could just talk through that, I'd appreciate it.
Director Sullivan?
Yeah, happy to. And I want to be both clear, but it will perhaps be unclear. The situation is different, Alderman Sullivan, for these two funding sources. So in the case of the $617,000 that's being accepted in what we refer to as 5339 federal money, monies are already set aside to match this at the local level. So you've already allocated funding that will match this, and we are required to provide a match at the city level. The same is true of the $130,000, but the difference is that the $130,000 that we're receiving from the state of New Hampshire actually represents 7.5% of a total of 15% match that we are required to supply at the local level. So again, for this specific award for these replacement vans, the city is required to produce 15% match for this federal money that's coming in. Of that, 7.5% is actually going to be provided by the state of New Hampshire, and the city remains with the burden of providing the other 7.5%. Now, the question as to where that comes from, That match money is actually already programmed within the SURF, Alderman Sullivan, and that's actually the case for both of these requests. So SURF is actually providing the funding or matching support for these purchases. With the exception of the bus shelters are actually being matched by funds that were already put aside as part of prior allocations and capital planning monies that we sought during last year's supplemental or escrow process.
Okay.
All set, Alderman Sullivan?
Still looking for that whiteboard, but that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to clarify on some things that were said earlier, and Director Sullivan can correct me if I'm wrong, but the paratransit buses, the vehicles that are used for paratransit, typically they don't do the fixed route exactly. They do a point-to-point, I am eligible for paratransit and I need to be brought to X, Y, or Z appointments. But they're also used as a backup when the city has a route interruption. So sometimes you'll get picked up in the short bus, I guess you could call it, and it's because maybe a bus was offline or a driver wasn't available because they're sick. I know they were seeing a little bit of extra use last year when we had a shortage of drivers for the big buses, and I noticed a couple more of them this past week, so probably some kind of seasonal issues happening again. But they are smaller buses. They have more space for people who might have mobility wheelchairs relative to the number of seats you have for regular people. But they definitely are workhorses too. They get a lot of use.
Yeah, Alderman Lopez, just to echo your comments, they're used for a variety of things. Certainly the primary use is that paratransit or on-demand response service that we operate, but they're used as backup to run a regular fixed route service over some of the routes that are less ridden, particularly the 7, the 12, the 3, the 5. They are also used as catch-up vehicles, as you mentioned, when a route is running behind due to construction or some other factor. Those vans are deployed to catch up riders. And they're also used for other transport of other groups as well. And so they are really a multi-purpose vehicle. In some ways, they're more critical to our fleet than the buses are at times. But our fleet is aged, particularly 5 of the vehicles need to be phased out, and we're working to do that.
And I just, if I can follow up.
Follow up?
I just thought it was worth pointing out, particularly because there's a savings component here too. If your 20% or 25% of your bus route is undone and you already are on your way back, but you're not going to get the other part, you don't need to send out a whole bus to go get them. And then likewise, when there's smaller routes that don't have the same ridership, they can be more efficient with how much they're sending out.
Other questions? Seeing none. Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 24-094. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Also before us this evening, Mr. Chairman, is R-24-099, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the Nashua Board of Education and the Nashua Association of School Administrators and Supervisors, American Federation of School Administrators, AFL-CIO, from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027, and related transfers. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24-099. And Crystal, if you'd like to come up and identify yourself. And
Sure. Good evening, all. So Crystal DeGray, Chief Operating Officer over at the school district. So a few things, I guess, just to highlight. So a 3-year contract in front of you, 58 full-time employees. We don't anticipate that to change over the next 3 years, hopefully. So in year 1, we're looking at a 4% increase across the board for fiscal year 25, which we are currently in. For fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27, we're looking for a 3.5% increase for this population. No other cost items except for, of course, insurance along the way that we have on the costing sheet. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
And the funding for these has already been budgeted, and it's the money that you're requesting for transfer from contingency to the school department to cover the cost.
That is correct.
Questions, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much. Mr. Gray, you mentioned 58 full-time employees. Do you have 58 full-time employees? Any openings?
So as of Friday, we have one opening at this time. We are in the process of possibly looking to hire a director of transportation
Okay.
with a resignation that happened.
Oh, okay, got it.
Let's get them
Follow-up, please.
Follow-up, Alderman Sullivan?
In year 2 of the contract, fiscal year '26, I did notice a slight downtick in retirement costs, 0.2%. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. That definitely is a variable number for sure. We're thinking based off of just kind of the staff in place. I think we worked with the city to determine kind of what that number should be. You know, anticipating some folks might retire early, some folks might retire later than expected.
So
We
that's
definitely
just a
had
forecast on
That
what
is
you
correct.
see. Okay,
Yep.
got it. All right,
All set.
thanks. Yep.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
And the motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 24-099. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, also before us this evening is R-24-102, relative to the transfer of $26,809 from Department 142, Woodlawn Cemetery, to Department 140, Pinewood Cemetery. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
So the motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 24-102. I don't think we have anyone here to answer any questions, but if you have any questions, we can see what we come up with. But it's basically transferring monies from one cemetery to another to cover some expense they anticipate. Any questions? Seeing none, motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 24-102. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R-24-103, establishing a Nashua Mall Mill Yard Dog Park Expendable Trust Fund, funded by donations. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24-103, which is establishing the Mill Yard Dog Park. Is there anyone here to speak to that?
Amber spoke to it.
She already spoke to it.
Yes, but
Oh, okay.
somebody snuck in to speak to it.
I did. I was watching online. Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. As you heard from the chair of our advisory committee this morning, or this afternoon, this would help us start building donations. The original idea is to start commissioning donations for the design portion of this, and then help it implement and then maintain long-term. So this would be a very long-term fund, which is why the Expendable Trust Fund is the funding option here.
Questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not sure if this is really a question, but I endorsed, or I put in this legislation, we often ask, we often say we want things to be good in Nashua, we want things to progress, and we want not to have to spend money from the taxpayer. So I think this is a perfect thing to be able to have it generate its own funds. There's people waiting to put money in this fund, so I think, we should pass this.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Ms. Hammond, if my family were to make a donation to a much lovable pet, my dog Obi, couldn't think of a better name. Everybody's an Obi in my family.
We need his dog Obi.
But if I wanted to make it, could I make a memorial donation in his name? Is that allowed with
Yes.
this? Thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
I just want to point out that some of the uses of this in terms of its utility to the city are the dispersal of canine waste all over the city is legitimately a public health concern. It can get into groundwater. It can be obviously problematic for people on playgrounds that might be closer to the ground or in the ground if they're like kids that are digging and stuff. So there's that component of it. And having a central area where you can have access to it, you can educate dog owners as to various city ordinances, services, and that kind of stuff. It's very sought after in the inner city particularly. I think a lot of our areas, we have a lot of enthusiastic dog owners, which we have, I think, still only one animal control officer, which is a really big job. So having a way to positively engage dog owners and a focus where we can manage cleanup in a more efficient manner. Everyone's supposed to be walking around with a bag and doing their own cleanup, but there's a lot of dogs running around, and a lot of that ends up on public property. So at least proving the model and getting it up and running starts as like a flagship, and I think an opportunity to kind of engage dog owners with a positive solution to an obvious problem, as well as a more efficient approach by the city to managing it.
Sullivan?
Thanks. We're members of the Udicki Farm Dog Park. It's excellent. It's a great way, and it's well-governed and well-kept, and I think this is a great way to do it. And what I specifically like about this legislation is it is very specific with the trust fund. It's current. We know how we're going to fund it. We know what we're going to do with the money when we need it. So I appreciate that, and certainly will be supporting it.
Other questions? Seeing none. Motion before us is R-24-103 for final passage. Recommend final passage of the full board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the big one. R-24-104, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $1,500,000 of assigned fund balance into the capital project activity Stello Stadium turf field replacement, protection field cover, and other renovations. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage to the full board of R-24-104. I think we had a whole bunch of questions that were answered during the public hearing, but are there any additional questions? Well, Senate?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a couple of questions related to the longevity of this turf, and in particular, how we're going to make this investment last, because obviously we're really caught in between a rock and a hard place right now. I went back and did just a little recency research. There was a discussion held at the Board of Education on 10/15 where the current state of Stellos was discussed, and some items brought up that really gave me pause. In particular, I believe it was Ms. Bishop that stated that Stellos averages somewhere in the market of 24 games a week, where the turf was designed for something more in the market of 2 to 4 games a week. That's obviously going to shorten the lifespan of a turf like this. So one of my questions is the turf that we're getting with this proposal and the measures that we're putting in place adequate to handle the current load, or is there something more consistent that we're foregoing in the interest of cost?
Smith, do you want to address that, or Lisa?
Hi. So
introduce yourself.
Sorry, Lisa Gingras. I'm the Director of Athletics for the school district. So in terms of use per week, we pretty much play Monday through Friday, 2 games a day. And then on Saturday, we could have anywhere from 4 to 6 games, depending if there's a football game, because football will take up a larger chunk of time. And then on Sundays during the fall, youth football pretty much uses the stadium from 7 a.m. till about 8 p.m. So I would say the game usage is more like 14 to 17 games a week than 24 games a week. And the turf that we are getting, it is highest quality, top notch. That's one of the reasons why we're going with this company. And in terms of how we're going to protect it, We don't allow food on the field. We, as much as we possibly can, ask the kids not to chew gum while they're on the field, little things like that. We move things around, we alter, we try not to play, 14 soccer games in the same week. We'll mix it in between football and field hockey as well, so different parts of the field are being used. We are very conscious about putting chairs on the field, anything that's not getting out on the field with proper footwear to play a game. And that's where the field coverings come in. It's not field coverings like you consider for like a baseball field that's going to protect it for the weather. It's more a field covering to protect it for things like graduation when you're going to put chairs out on the field. So that's what the potential field covering that we're exploring later down the road is for.
Okay, so that was actually going to be one of my follow-up questions, was whether or not
So-
a cover would be.
Just so you know, we're gonna try and see about looking at other alternatives for covers that are less expensive, but
Yes.
they will be looked at as
Yeah.
part of the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was actually going to be one of my follow-ups, was because that's what I was envisioning was, oh, it's raining at Fenway, we're allowed to cover it.
No.
And so this sounds like it's something more akin to what I've seen at like a field like LeLetcher Park, where they'll hold a concert there, and in order to preserve the baseball field, they'll put down, it struck me as sort of a sport court material, but I would imagine on something like the field at Stellos, probably a little less obtrusive, because that is gritted in there.
Right.
Okay. All right, that helps for now. Thank you.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So I have several questions. So I've been reading about, the safety of artificial turf fields. I've read criticisms about, the artificial surfaces being, more of a danger for, concussion injuries as opposed to natural field. And my understanding is that this field turf that we're replacing it's not really a carpet, it's some type of plastic material that covers I don't know what's underneath there. Is it asphalt or cement or?
It's gravel and sand and of the like underneath. And when the turf field was first put in, and it's been very interesting as we've gone to other places to play on their turf, since the shutdown at Stellos, everybody's like, ooh, this is what it's supposed to feel like? Because it's very, very different when a new turf is put in. It is like a carpet. It is much softer. There are rubber-like pellets that are put in it that also helps, but the fibers need to be standing up so that the rubber pellets can fill in between. But because our fibers have been so destroyed and crushed and leaned over, no matter how much we fill them with the pellets, that's where we've gone and run into the problem, that there's no place left to put in the softness factors, for a simple way of explaining that. And that is exactly why your comment about the potential concussions, that's exactly why we have the field GMAX tested every year, is for that exact reason.
Follow-up, Alderman Jettie?
So can we be assured, are you telling us that what you're going to do to this field is the best available technology for the protection of the players?
That's what we're trying to do. Mr. Smith might want to add to that.
The additional thing we're doing this time, which we haven't done in the last two installations, is there's a pad underneath the turf. You think of it as just a mat everything's sewn in, and you have these pieces of grass sticking up. Underneath that's going to be another pad, and that's going to really help cushion and prevent concussions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the technology's improved over the past 10 years significantly. That's why we're going with the best field available.
Okay, good, thank you.
Follow-up, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you. So that's reassuring. The other question I had was with the field covering. So from what you said before, the sole purpose of the field covering is to allow us to use the field for like graduations. Would it make sense not to have graduations or that type of activity on the field and just leave it for if we left it just for football, soccer, field hockey, would we need this covering?
I would say if there is no non-athletic event that takes place, then we probably would not need the field covering, because the coverings are to disperse the weight, so they're not pinpoint like chair corners, that it disperses it and it protects the field. It's the same thing Gillette Stadium uses when they have concerts. It's similar to Fenway Park when they use concerts and things like that. So it's for non-athletic events.
Okay, and.
Follow up?
So on that point, is it possible to have a graduation there where we would just use the stadium seats? Or are there other facilities where we could hold the graduation?
Not really my decision, I guess.
Just so you know, up until they started using Stellas, they always used the arena up at the Verizon Center. It's got so many high schools using it. Graduation.
Holman Stadium.
Yeah, Holman Stadium.
So did I.
I graduated at Holman Stadium because my class was the first class that was too large to have indoors. And it worked very well, but again, now with the renovations to the field at Holman Stadium, you would be damaging that field if you had a graduation with the number of students we're talking about. So for years, they did the graduation, and when I was on the Board of Education, at the Verizon Center. Worked out very well. The only concern was people having to drive to Manchester, because we don't have a venue here in Nashville. So there are other possibilities, but that is strictly a Board of Education question, and that's why no decision will be made on the field covering until they make a decision on what's going to be held at Stellas.
It just seems like an expensive item for 2 events.
Very expensive.
A year. And I have one more. So the list of items that Mr. Smith, you provided with us, it looks like, I understand we have an emergency situation with the field having failed and having to cancel games there. So we need to repair the field as soon as possible. But all of these other items don't seem to have the urgency that this does. So, how much would it cost just to do the field, and without the? I'm not saying that these other items shouldn't be considered, but it seems like those could be done more in the course of the regular budgeting system. But, do you have an answer for that?
So the cost for the replacing the turf you have, that's one of the numbers I provided. I also recommended you provide some additional funds for the under drainage. So those are the 2 things that absolutely have to happen. The sooner the better, so we can have an uninterrupted spring season.
Can I address the other 2?
And you want to talk about the rest of the stuff?
Yeah, so 2 of the other items are the gates in the stairs to the stands. That is a safety issue for our students and our officials and our coaches and our fans, because that helps keep them off the field, as opposed to, we've all seen the videos of people storming fields and things like that. So it's a safety precaution. And fans and spectators and athletes, things have changed very much in many years. So that the gates for the stairs on the main stands is a safety concern. The other one is the fence perimeter around the field. That is also a safety concern in terms of keeping people off the field, but also keeping balls from hitting spectators as they are thrown and kicked and things like that. Those are 2 items. I believe the last quote we got was under $70,000 to do those. And we had talked many times of, do we just go ahead with the gates and the fence? But it didn't make any sense to do the fence before we redid the field. So Mr. Smith and I had talked many times that those things were kind of a package deal with the turf, the drainage, the fence, and the gates.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Brian Conant's somewhere going, please, please do not do this at Holman. Nothing at Holman. I know he doesn't even like us playing baseball there. So I have a comment and then a question. My comment is to former Alderman Johnson's point about BG. Yeah, 100% they should be paying more, or they should be, we shouldn't need to fund that for them. They should pay more on that, I think. You know, as things change over time, inflation goes up, they should be paying more. My question is, and this may be more to Alderman Dowd, is, so we have the 1.5 million. Are we still looking at any potential for any kind of grant or anything like that that could help us outside of the donations we're getting from the Stellos family?
Yeah, there were no grants available for the field. That was one of the first questions.
Okay.
And the Patriots, the year they gave us the money, we were the only school in New England to get their grant. And so they share it in all of New England. So we're not have to be on the scoreboard again for that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the covering and any other item that we have as a potential wish list. When we came before this board for other items, when we had that funding that we had to do prior, when we had to, for the main Dunstable, I think it was the main Dunstable, we had those items, and I think you referenced to them as they were items that we had hoped to do for the gym and so on. And we said that, I think you had said they were always in the plan, but they weren't written down.
They were alternates.
They were alternates, but we never saw them in writing. I think in the future, and I think I had said that then, that when we have these things that we call alternates, we should have them written down somewhere. And I don't have a problem with this covering being alternate, but I think that, you know, for us as aldermen, that we kind of know that these are alternates, so that when you were talking about them and you said, well, if we have extra money, because I think what the public looks at is that we're not being transparent and that we're just kind of tacking it on, and that this 1.5 will become 1.7 because we're looking at that. And I don't want, you know, social media and so on going on and saying, oh, they're coming up with these things. I think that it's not a bad thing to have, especially if we're looking at having having graduations there, because it's the only place to have the graduations because of this. I just don't want the public to be able to come back and say, you know, this is an alternate and this board is tacking these on, and then there's an op-ed in a newspaper somewhere saying that this is what's being planned or something. I don't want to give that voice to someone somewhere. So I would really kind of like that when we have these alternates and we're considering this, that we kind of put this out on the table. I don't know how we do that, but that we just kind of say, hey, this is what our plan is. This is the 1.5. And I'm not arguing with any of these items. I just would kind of say that, you know, when we build this project contingency, this project contingency is always, in my mind, always been, if we run over, in other words, we have I don't want to say an oops, but if we run into something that there's an asbestos or something like that, that's always the way I look at it. Yeah, unknown. Yeah, your favorite expression. I always look at that as what a project contingency, not as if, you know, we have leftover money and then we can buy that. So I kind of like to look at this is that if this cover is an alternate, because I always look at an alternate that if we didn't need, because I heard Mr. Smith say, you know, I was looking at the roof and we may not need to do that. That is what I look at. Well, if we don't need to do the roof, then maybe we can get this thing. That would have been a nice alternative. Not that suddenly we have this 200,000, now we might be able to, we can use that money to get something else, and then now we have $1.7 million to spend. That's all. I'm just trying to say is
the 200,000 will definitely be used
just
for the
that.
field.
Yes.
So, and some of these items, he gave you the entire list. The cover is depends on whether they're going to use the field for graduation. So that's why it's an alternate. We're also trying to find out we can get a cover that's less expensive than the only one we've had the bid so far. You know, so we're not gonna say this is the one we're doing, and that's, we're not gonna look at something that might be less expensive. That's why it's an alternate. And we're only going to have the budget that this board provides for the stadium. And at least in my opinion, I don't think the joint special is gonna come back and ever ask for any more money. So whatever money is appropriated for this project is going to be used for this project. The other alternates could be the painting of, and the fence underneath the stands. Is that critical? No, it's not critical. So when we have a budget, that's the budget. You know, there will be some money in contingency because the unknown unknowns, you know, and every budget we've entertained, at least the ones that I've been in charge of, are come in on time and under budget. So we're not going to spend any more money. We're not going to look to add anything else to this project that's not on that list that you have in front of you. Cleve, follow up?
Yes, I guess then, I'm not on this committee, but my thinking would be then, if you pass this at 1.5 million, and we know we're gonna get that 200,000, you pass this by 1.5 and you've got that 200,000, you're gonna spend 1.7. I guess that's my thinking. That's what my thinking, that's what the people are going to think. So why wouldn't you want to pass this for 1.3 million knowing that you're going to get the 200? I'm just saying, I guess.
Because unless you can guarantee that the legislation for accepting the 200,000 will work, I don't want to shortchange us now. When we accept that 200K, if somebody wants to make a motion to make that other number less, but we're you know,
I see your point.
We're only going to do what we're going to do, but we can't base a legislation decision tonight on something that hasn't happened yet. It hasn't even been written yet. And
I see your point.
I know that Attorney Pullman has a check, but there's a process that has to go through, and it's not going to be an immediate. I'm intending to sign the contract on Thursday to get this field done.
Valid point. Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. Ms. Gingras, you probably might not remember, but I had the fun of coaching the JV lacrosse team.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very proud. All those kids that play for me joined the Marines, and they spent time in the big sandbox, and I compliment every single one of them. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was the good coaching I gave to them, but anyways. I'm concerned, is this a universal field for all sports? As you know, in lacrosse, I could take the ball, bounce it in front of them, and score the goal. And, you know, it's different than, you know, what a soccer ball would behave, or the needs of, you know, field hockey or something like that. So is it about as universal as we can get?
Yes, it is.
For all the sports?
And one thing that's going to be different about this field also is all of our lines for football, soccer, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse, and field hockey, the 5 sports that we play at Stellos, are all going to be stitched in, whereas now some of the lines are painted on after the fact, which also does more wear and tear on the turf. And then some of them, the turf was cut out and inlays were put in and glued down. So that's going to prevent some of that breakdown. Everything is going to be directly stitched in for all those sports. Okay. And this is going to be a very much different turf than we've had in previous years.
Good, outstanding. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the follow-up, probably Mr. Smith, more along your lines. I am chairman of the Committee of Infrastructure. Shamefully, I'm dealing with stuff that past boards have kicked down the road. The Hunt community. If they went out and hired a glass guy, we wouldn't be spending some of the money that we're spending right now. The unbalance that's in front of the library, that didn't happen overnight. And the parking garage with exposed rebar did not happen overnight. That somebody ignored it. because there was always the age of, oh, not in my watch am I gonna spend this type of money. So I like to stop that. I compliment the mayor. At least the mayor has the foresight to see that we've gotta take care of some of the structures that the city owns. So my question to you, Mr. Smith, by doing some of this extra work, we'll increase the longevity of Stello Stadium and make it more attractive, but it will help keep the longevity, looking at the roof structure and everything else like that. Am I correct in assuming so?
Yes, you can view part of this as preventive maintenance. If we don't replace the entire roof, but we instead at least take care of the seams and whatnot that are popping loose, that's going to save the inside of the structure where rainwater and whatnot will not be getting in. Pretty much everything we've got on our docket or proposing to do is along those same lines. And the turf we're proposing is a good turf. It's better than anything that's ever been made. And we're putting the pad underneath it to help prevent injury to kids. So I think we're doing all the right things.
Paul, just one brief follow-up, and it's more like a statement. By not taking care of problems such as this is a waste of taxpayers' money. When we could have got it, nipped it in the bud, such as you know, say with the other structures, a coat of paint here and covering up something, it's going to behoove us in the long run. You know, as well as replacing the field, of course, and everything else. But consider that when you vote. It's about time to bite the bullet and start taking care of some of the buildings that we own and to keep them operating. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Kelly.
Thank you, and perfect follow-on to that. So I have a couple of questions, but most of my questions are around maintenance and how we're currently maintaining it and what we can do to make sure that when we replace this, because I'm going to support this, that it continues to stay where we need it to be. So question one is, I haven't stepped on a field since I was 16. I was a soccer team, been a very long time, more of a dancer. But the GMAX texting, how accurate is that and how long is it accurate? Because we got a report in July that it was okay, and then in October it wasn't. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I'll try. It's a standard test that's accepted by colleges and universities across the country. How accurate is it? You know, they use standard deviations and those sorts of things. I do have an engineering background, but even I have a little difficulty following it. But it is to measure the hardness of the surface. And I'm sure there's a safety margin in there. But when that goes, if you looked at, and if you've seen the reports that were done, particularly the one in October, you see more red lines, more red spots on the field than you did back in July. So it did evolve over the summer. Started to get used again, because it's not used in the summer very much.
It
right?
has a lot of camps.
So it definitely degraded just between July and September. I think it's pretty accurate. Again, it's something that's used across the country as a test of the hardness of the surface.
Yeah. And just to add on to that also, it was not just the GMAX testing rating that caused concern for the safety. There were wear spots that, with the use from July to the end of September, the amount of use that it got, there were significant spots that were trip hazards, that were catching toes under things, foot hazards that I was honestly more concerned about than the hardness of the field. We knew the hardness of the field. We knew it was being replaced. We were just trying to get through the fall. But then those other areas that deteriorated brought us to where we were at the beginning of October.
Understood. If I could follow up?
Follow up?
Great. So annual maintenance cost of this field, and what does that look like?
I don't know. Park and Rec maintains it for us. It's a school facility primarily because state building aid was used to build it for school buildings, and they've maintained it pretty well ever since. I would say we probably need to ensure we replace the turf more often. We went 11 years the first time and then 13 years this time. When we got the first field, they said, well, it'll last you 8, 9 years. We went a little bit further. This last time, they said it'll last you 10 years. Now we're at 13. So I think that's the biggest thing we can do, is be a little more proactive in setting up the replacement. I know Park and Rec, part of the list of things they want to get is the groomer, field groomer. It's basically a big lawn tractor that has something pulled behind it. It rakes all those rubber granules. Because as you can imagine, especially football, most of the game is played between the hash marks up and down the middle of the field. So all the rubber granules get pushed out from that over time. So they should be out there grooming it at least once a week, if not more often. I can't say for sure if they're doing that or not.
I know in years past they had been. I can't speak to if it was every week, but I do know a few times during each season they would brush it, as we would refer to it, and there was a significant difference in the surface the day or two or week after they would do the grooming. So I know that moving forward, that's something that would be done more on a regular basis, especially with the new machine.
Okay, great.
All set?
I just had one other comment. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate that this is a tough job and there's a lot of things that have come up. So thank you for answering our questions. I just want to make the comment that I'm going to support this, but I think that we as a board and as a budget committee need to look very closely at how we're going to manage these maintenance. We talk about it every time, and then we get to every single time it's an emergency. Oh, we let it go to 13 years instead of 10. So I personally, as someone who sat in the budget for 7 years and hope to sit on there again, I want to hear a lot about maintenance, and I want to talk about specific projects that we put in place and what we're doing to maintaining them. Because if we're going to spend $1.5 million on a field, we should be putting aside every single year what it's going to cost to replace that field in 10 years.
I've had discussions with the mayor and Lisa, Director Photo, and it's something we want to sit down and determine what that maintenance portion consists of and what it doesn't consist of. And I'd also like to see the field handle, much like we do surf, put aside, say if we decide it's going to go 9 years, you know, we put money aside every year, so that when it comes time to do the field, the money's sitting aside. We'd have to probably develop another special revenue fund,
Yep.
but let's get the field replaced first, and then we'll have a little time to set up how it should be taken care of going forward. And I agree, having sat on the Capital Appropriations Committee, I was the only one that gave this a high priority this year.
And candidly, it's not just this field.
So,
We got Holman to look at, we just put in a new middle school. It's like as we build things, we can't keep falling into the trap of not maintaining them.
yes, so I'm gonna go over here, down this side, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. A few questions. Once you had mentioned you're going to sign the contract on Thursday. Does this now get turned over to the JSSBC?
It's already in the JSSBC.
No, I know that, but we're going to monitor the
Yes.
the
Oh, yes.
project. Okay.
Yes. We will, just like a school project.
Can you, I know we're in the very early stages of this. This has not even been approved yet, but timelines. When do we expect this to be done?
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb. The company has said that they will be here the day after we sign the contract. I assume that's probably like a Monday, not a Friday. And they've given us a timeline. We'll give you a timeline, but remember the unknown unknowns. If they have to put in more drainage, it may slip a little bit, but I'll let Mr. Smith, because he's talked to the company about timeline.
I believe the time to do the minimal drainage work they anticipate, plus tearing up the old field, putting down the new, is about 4 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So conceivably, this could be close to December 1st, give or take.
Okay.
As long as it's snowing.
Right.
That's why we want to get it going, so we can get all the work done this fall, so in the spring, they can hit the road running.
And we didn't anticipate necessarily getting all those things done that are on that list, but certainly the turf and the under drainage have to happen this fall.
Okay.
Yes.
Last
Follow up?
question was brought up in comments about Bishop Girton. I had the opportunity to speak to their administration, and when this situation came down, they certainly do not get it for free. They pay an annual amount. I'm wondering if someone could speak to how much they pay per year And it's also my understanding that that amount has increased under the new contract. And where does that money go?
What was it taken out to do?
Don, do you want to address the last part first, where it goes?
Dawn Enright, Treasurer Tax Collector for the city. The money that BG pays yearly is about $15,000, and it goes into a trust fund specifically for the replacement and maintenance of the field. And the contract that is currently with BG is estimating a replacement cost of $500,000. So I think the contract probably should be reviewed, but that is what is being paid, and that is where it's going, and it has a specific purpose.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Anybody want to answer the rest of the question? Lisa?
Just a couple of quick things about the contract also. When that contract was renegotiated, they also put forth, I think it was either $15,000 or $16,000 to bring better internet to the stadium, because prior to that, we had no internet service whatsoever. And we're able to provide training tools for our coaches and our teams with that. So in addition to what they pay annually, there was an upfront cost to help with that expense.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Alderman Lopez.
So it was said earlier that there's an estimate for the cover cost to be around just renting it instead of buying one. What it came out to be something like $300,000 a year for events we expect already.
Again, as Alderman Dowd has said, we got one quote from one company that's like
replacing it. I mean.
Yep. So it was about $121,000 that included the rental fee for the cover plus the labor to haul it here, put it down, come back and get it, take it up, and take it away.
And is that explicitly for the graduation, or are there other events too?
That's the only event that takes place that's not athletic.
Okay, so annually you'd be talking about 121 for the to rent a cover versus buy a cover?
Yes.
Okay, so that was my question for that amount. I guess I would conceivably wonder or assume that the school department has that money in their current budget for this year's graduation?
We've never covered the turf since graduation's been taking place at Stellos.
Okay, so that's just a hypothetical cost.
Yes.
Okay, well, my question was going to be, if we get a cover, then does that money, some of that money come out of the school budget? But apparently that's imaginary, and there is no money in the school budget for it. I would be interested if anything had been done with the previous money built up in the from payments that Bishop Girton has made for the.
So funds that they made the previous time in, I believe it was 2018, we replaced the scoreboards. We replaced both scoreboards at both ends, and the school department, as well as those reserve funds, were used together to purchase and install the new scoreboards, because the contract is specifically for improvements to the stadium, not necessarily just for the turf.
Okay, so that might be something to look at in the future. If we're going to try to preserve the field, is how are we defining field? But I think obviously we're in the situation we're in, so we have to kind of move forward with it.
Other questions on this side? Alderman Wiltshire.
Yeah, I just first want to respond to something Alderman O'Brien brought up about neglect of our infrastructure and prior boards. The answer to that is budget caps. Plain and simple. And I too was curious how many non-sporting events are held there during the year, and it's just 2 graduations?
Yes, the 2 high school graduations, and then there is one Spartans event that takes place in the summer, but they're a marching band type organization, so it's no different than our marching bands at halftime at our football games.
I find that a lot of money to allow 3 non-sport uses a year. $421,000. Not only that, buying it, but then we have to install it, we have to maintain it, we have to store it.
Yeah.
That's going to be over $500,000, and it's just going to keep adding up. I say we don't buy a cover and we don't allow those activities there. That's just my thought right now, unless someone comes up with a much cheaper cover, or it just seems like a lot of money for 3 events that don't need to happen there.
I think that, again, goes back to the Board of Education decision, but they would have to work on the funding. Yeah, if it's rented per event or per year, they come and install it and take it away and maintain it and all that other stuff. If we buy it, now it's gonna be manpower to install it, manpower to take it back, storage, repair, there's a lot of other elements that go along with buying it. And like I said, we're gonna look at other alternatives, but it is awfully expensive to buy it. Alderman, did you have your hand up first? Alderman Tebow?
Yeah. The life expectancy of the current no longer used field versus the life expectancy of the new higher tech version.
The life expectancy under normal wear and tear, which would be one high school, is about 10 to 15 years. Again, depending on, are you playing 5 games a week, or are you playing 20 games a week? So the life expectancy is about the same, but as we've all talked about, this gets excessive use, so that's why we're planning, hopefully, to be replacing it every 8 to 10 years rather than waiting until we hit the max of 15.
The other thing I'd like to point out is that no practices are held there, I don't think, but the high schools have fields where
Yes.
they practice football and lacrosse and.
We do practice at the stadium in August before any games start, and then once there's games, there's no place for practice. So soccer and field hockey will practice there for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks before they start games in the fall season, depending on the year. It determines how many weeks there are. And then in the springtime, because the snow melts a lot faster on the turf than it does on the ground, and you don't have to worry about the moisture and all that in the dirt, we will practice lacrosse there again for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks before we start our games. But once games happen, there are no practices there.
Follow up?
Yes, please. Ms. Enright brought up the trust fund. So what is the current balance of said trust fund?
Is that the 84,000?
Dawn Enright, tax collector treasurer. The balance in the Stello Stadium Trust Fund that has about 84,000.
You want to, while you're up there, address why we can't use the other money?
Certainly. So there is another trust fund, it's actually a capital reserve, that it's labeled Stello Stadium YMCA. This particular fund was set up through resolution, and it's only to be used for the maintenance of the joint shared area between the YMCA and the stadium. The parking lot, the lighting, the shrubbery, beautification in that area. Nothing inside the stadium and nothing inside the Y. And that has a balance of 260 some odd thousand.
All set?
All set. Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, well, could that be changed? Is that by ordinance, or is that because the money that was put in there was agreed to with the Y?
We're probably getting a field here from the thing in question, but that would be a legal question, and we don't have any lawyers with us. And it's probably the Y would have a real concern with that. It was set up when the Y went there so that, because they share parking lots and things, and the city wanted a way to make it amicable for both activities. To change it to use for the stadium, now we draw money away from that. I got a feeling there'd be a real fight on that, but it's outside the question of this particular resolution. Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to just say was it's hard for me to, I mean, I'm going to support this, but what this comes down to, again, the management of the Board of Education, because if we're going to do this and spend this money, I agree that it would be nice to somehow not allow them to use it for non-sports things, so for the graduations, you know. But there's no way for this board to be able to do that. So it's frustrating because we get into these, time and time again, we get into this kind of stuff where, and it spans from anywhere from a teacher's contract all the way to stuff like this, where, you know, we have to make the hard decisions and spend the money. And when we do, then the decisions on the other side aren't necessarily ones that coincide with the best way forward in regards to what we just spent the money on. So I hope that if there are some Board of Education members listening, that they take that seriously. The only other thing I would say is if we do want to get a cover, we should probably look at seeing whether or not it would make sense to get one for Holman Stadium instead, because that's a more versatile stadium, and it might make more sense to do it there. You could have the graduations there, but then you could do a lot of other stuff there too. And that might be a better place to do it, and, you know, that would maybe alleviate some of the concerns that Parks and Rec has with that stadium. So that's just a thought. As far as this legislation here in front of us, you know, I was listening to some of the comments earlier about could we reduce this to just the turf replacement and things like that, and I was looking at the, you know, maybe if it went down to $1 million, but then you get to the area, you get to the idea of, well, okay, but then when do we do this other stuff? And then how much more is it going to cost down the road, as opposed to what it will now? You know, and to me, we should be doing this, we should be doing the things that are on the list, and hoping that the amount can be reduced by $200,000 with the gift from the Stellos family. And I would hope that that would be done, and we stick to this list and not do anything beyond that, so that we can effectively reduce this bond amount by $200,000. So those are my comments.
Yeah, just by the way, the machine that's on this list that to adjust, to take care of the turf is gonna increase its longevity, so that's as critical as the field.
Right.
Alderman Tebow first, and I'll actually, Alderman Cleveland, all right.
No, he's
He's
a
on the
member,
budget
he's a member on the committee, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to be very transparent about my comments, because my comments often get, people like to take my comments and put them all out in the, what do they call it, the interwebs, and twist them in a way. So I'm going to be very clear here. When I mentioned BG, and all former Alderman Johnson mentioned BG, we both said that BG pays. And we've been told several times how much they pay. I wrote down 15,000 on here. So we knew exactly how much they pay and where it goes in, what fund it goes in. We've been told that. And so I never said that they don't pay. I say they don't pay enough. And we do not have to let them use it. And we did, again, to be very transparent, we got an email from, I guess, their principal or someone from their school blasting us for not having this field for them to play on. So we do not need to let them play there. And less playing on that field lets it go longer. So I'm fine with them playing there, but I think they need to pay their fair share. And I think every contract should be, when it's renewable, time to increase that. Because as we know, in the city and all across the country, things are going up. And so it's very important that we go with inflation on that and they pay the amount. Believe me, what they charge students, they got plenty of money to spend on this.
Alderman Clee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague at the end here who made comment about the cover, it is a bit of a frustration when we talk about the cover, because whether it be an alternate or whatever, we can't, and for the public to know, we can't tell the Board of Ed how to spend their money. We give them their bottom line budget and that's it. They may bring their budget with all their line items, but The Board of Aldermen cannot tell them how to spend their money. When we do a bond here and they tell us how they're going to spend it, and the joint special and so on goes through it, yes, the Board of Aldermen does have a say in it because they do line by line item. But when it comes to if they decide they want to buy a cover through their funding, they can buy a cover. I do like the idea that we buy, if we're considering doing any kind of cover, I think it should go for Holman, and I would strongly urge the Board of Ed to consider using that place as as long as those that are renting Holman would agree to have graduations there. I think maybe we should re-engage that as a place of graduation, rather than using a turf type of thing where we could ruin that. I think it might be easier to fix the turf at Holman Stadium than something like this at Stello's. Maybe I'm wrong. I have no idea how this is concerned, but we can't tell them how to spend their money. But I think it would be better if we kind of work together on this. So I don't like the idea of spending that kind of money on, and I hope that we would disengage this as an alternative. So I want to put my 2 cents in. I'm not on this committee. I'm not going to have a vote tonight, but I will have a vote in about maybe 20 minutes. So hopefully maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's getting to be a long night, and I'm tired. But that's not going to be part of the vote. This is going to be part of the vote. I think to my colleague's point, to nickel and dime this and say, let's bring this down to 1 million or 1.2 million or 1.3 million is not going to get us anywhere. We need to do the 1.5 million, but I do hope that when the $200,000 is approved, we bring this down to 1.3 million. I've had my say.
Thank you. So Portsmouth recently replaced their turf, and there was an article in one of the newspapers about how the contractor had promised to dispose of the used turf in a environmentally responsible way, or some words to that effect. And they found it rolled up in some warehouse in New Jersey. And I'm just wondering if our contractor has made any representations about what they're going to do with the old turf and how they're going to dispose of it, and whether we can get them to commit to doing it responsibly.
Mr. Smith?
We'll tag team it.
We'll tag team it, go ahead.
Okay. So none of this material coming out of Stellos will go to our landfill, which is the really good news. I believe, and maybe your memory's better than mine, they repurpose the old turf and do other things with it. Right, is that correct?
Yes, that's what I was going to say, is in the contract, they are hauling it away and they are recycling the turf into other things. So whether they grind it all up and repurpose it as pellets or cut it into pieces, and there's some schools that have corners of gyms and weight rooms and things like that, they may recycle it and repurpose it that way.
So that's in the contract?
I believe it's in the
Yes.
contract.
So that's good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. Motion before us to recommend of the full board, very shortly, hopefully. The recommendation for final passage of R-24-104. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee, there is none. General discussion? No, none. Public comment?
It's just me again. I'm sure you're sick of me tonight, but this was my one night out to be here. Might not see me again, because I work so many hours at night. Anyway, good evening, Paula Johnson, Nashua. I don't know, some people might say it's a little scary when aldermen from Ward 8 and aldermen from Ward 3, I agree with them, or they agree with me, but they made some really good points tonight. And yes, we never said that BG was not paying. BG, if they pay 3 years, would be $540,000, 4 years, $720,000, and $15,000 a year. My question is, and I'm going to ask Mr. Griffin, and I'd like to get a complete accounting of the money from BG, how it was dispersed, and the account that it went in, how much to date was in that account. That's number one. Number two, on that agreement, what you was talking about, the $263,000, I'd like to also see that contract provision that we have, because according to this, it does not have any specifications, anything that says you cannot use it for anything inside of Stellos. Number three, when you talk about the parking lot around Stellos and you can use that money for, I'd like to know exactly where around Stellos. Is it the parking lot on the side of Stellos, or is it the parking lot between the Y and Stellos in front of the area? Because I questioned, and I know a lot of people in the city did not like my questioning, about how come we were repaving, which part of it was the Y area, the rest of it is the city, paving that. I'd like to see the agreement with the Y on what we had to retain on city property and what they have to do on city property on part of paving. I've asked, and nobody gave it to me. I guess I have to ask under the right to know law, but that's really a sad thing. This is where the city gets into trouble, because when you're elected on no matter what board, there's a two-tier system. You have to request on the right to know law, and if the city decides they'd like to give it to you,
1 minute.
they'll give it to you. If not, then you've got to cost the city money in lawsuits, and it shouldn't be like that. We're requesting information that citizens should be able to retain rather than jumping through hoops. And I have to say that I'm pretty lucky about it, being a former elected official in this city. And the third thing I will suggest to the Board of Education, we've got this beautiful performing arts center. Even if you have to do 3 or 4 graduations, let's use that.
30
I came up with a
seconds.
plan during COVID, how we could graduate our students between Stellos and Holman. Nobody listened to me, but they could have had that beautiful graduation. And yes, a cover for Holman, it might be the best place. So I do agree with several of you tonight. I guess that's a little scary, you know, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree, and we can work together as a team. Thank you.
Remarks by Alderman? Seeing none, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:09. And Alderman Wiltshire, the next meeting will start.
Now.
Agreed.
Okay, I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order on Monday, October 28th, 2024 at, at 9:09 PM.
Yep.
In the Aldermanic Chamber, which has been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website, in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91A. Tonight, our prayer will be offered by City Clerk, Acting Clerk, Alderman O'Brien, and Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Thank you, Madam President. Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty of managing the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with the spirit of unity and understanding which enable us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and clarity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help me God.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah.
Start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, please.
Alderman O'Brien is present. Alderwoman Timmons.
Here.
Alderman Moran is absent. Alderman Thibodeau.
Here.
Alderman Cabella.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderman Senate.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Theobald.
Here.
Alderman Clee.
Here.
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Here.
And Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
Madam President, you have 14 members present.
Thank you. Communications.
Communications from President Laurie Wilshire. Reason, calling a special Board of Aldermen meeting for October 28, 2024.
There being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. Public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board? Seeing none, unfinished business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-24-094, relative to the acceptance and appropriation of $617 from the State of New Hampshire Department of Transportation, FTA Section 5339, funds, and $130,500 from the State of New Hampshire Department of Transportation, State Fiscal Year 2025 Capital Match Funds into Transit Grant Activity, Transit Capital Projects.
Just for clarification, that would be $617,000. Alderman Senate.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion for final passage of R 24094.
Motion is for final passage. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That motion carries, and Resolution 2494 is declared duly adopted.
Also before us this evening, Madam President, is R-24-104, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $150,000 assigned fund balance into capital project activity, Stella Stadium turf field replacement, protection field cover, and other renovations. 1.5, yes.
1.5 million.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Dowd.
I'd like to make a motion for final passage of R-24-104.
Motion is for final passage. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So I'd like to move to amend to strike from the title in the first paragraph the words protective field cover and acquiring a protective field cover. And I'd like to speak to that.
Alderman Jettie.
So during the previous Budget Review Committee meeting, there was testimony about the purpose of this protective field cover and the expense. And it was stated that the protective field cover is needed for 3 different events during the year, and the cost would be in excess of $400,000, well, $300,000+ to rent such a protective field cover, and a cost of over $400,000 to buy one, but that didn't include the cost of installing it each time it was needed and storing it, et cetera. So it struck me as being an expensive proposition for just such a limited use. So I don't think it's worth it, and I think it can be eliminated, and the purpose of replacing the turf with technology as best as is available, is the right thing to do. So I would that's the reason for my motion. I looked at the list that Mr. Smith provided, and I can't see the price tag for the replacement of the cover. So I don't know how to reduce that from the 1.5 million. But I think at least we ought to, remove that from the resolution.
I would agree with that, except when the concept came up of putting a cover at Holman, that made a lot of sense to me because we're preserving the field at Stellos, and we're not giving up the opportunity for graduations and the Spartans for those 3 times a year if we could buy a cover for Holman. So that's where I stand on it, but appreciate your motion. Alderman Thibodeau was next.
Could I answer what you just?
Alderman Jettie, yes.
So this resolution has nothing to do with Holman.
I agree. It
This is
was brought up.
specific for Stellos.
Right. But the idea was brought up that if there were a cover, that it could possibly be used at Holman instead of at Stellos.
With all due respect, I think the cover would be designed to cover this field, not, the dimensions of Holman Stadium.
I understand
Something
that.
would have to be designed for Holman if that's what we wanted.
Okay. Alderman Thibodeau.
Mine is the funding. I was under the impression this was going to be cash, and everybody keeps talking about grants. Not grant, I apologize, bonding. So I was just curious if this was a bond issue or cash. It is cash? Okay.
All set, Alderman Thibodeau?
Well, I do have a follow-up.
Okay.
With Alderman Jettie. I happen to agree with Alderman Jettie, so I don't know if that is something we can make a further motion on. Can we take a vote on that? I agree with him that it shouldn't be part of this resolution.
This motion's on the table, so.
Clarification, Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, the 400,000 and the 100 or whatever thousand rental, all that was not in that number for 1.5. If you add in the cover, it's like 1.7. So we didn't put that number in there because there was no decision yet on whether we go with that cover, whether we do a cover or anything else. So that cover is not, even though it's in the legislation as saying do a cover, the cover cost is not in that estimate that Mr. Smith gave you. You notice the contingency isn't covering it, so.
Alderman Thibodeau, if you wanted to make a motion, you can, at any time.
Well, there's motion on the
The
floor.
motion on the floor.
It was to, okay, you're right. The motion is to, could you state your motion again?
To remove the words protective field cover from the title and the first paragraph, and also the words acquiring a protective field cover from the first paragraph of the resolution.
Thank you. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I am not going to support the Jettie amendment, mainly because it's putting the cart before the horse. I think Rick Dowd, in his testimony at the last meeting that was previously held, said they are going to do some research on other covers. And so I'm sure once that research was done, it would be brought back to the board for our perusal to look at it. Then we can make what's called an educated decision. Now, this thing that was the baby that just been born this evening is the Holman Stadium. Nobody has really looked at that. Can it be done? Is it feasible? So to go rock hard, with this basically in a way to protect the field cover, there's no money involved at this particular time with it, as using the terms from Alderman Dow, but it's mentioned in there, would be, I support this original resolution only because it states it in its clarity. all other things may come up for future decisions, whether do we want to stay with Stellas, or do we want to go to Holman, or maybe we can get bargain basement discounts for something that we want for a better field cover. But we don't know yet, so I'll wait and see. Thank you.
Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Madam President. Just taking Holman Stadium out of the equation, because it's really not part of the discussion right now. It's a good idea, but be that as it may, we're looking at a 1.5 million proposal here that we have a pretty detailed, itemized list of things we want to hit. Nowhere in there is a cover stated and quoted, and for that reason alone, I think it's germane to pass this amendment, just because we don't want to pass legislation that articulates that we're going to acquire a protective field cover that says protective field cover right in the title and then doesn't include a protective field cover. So I am going to support this amendment.
Alderman Lopez?
So I don't have a problem with pushing the protective field cover off. I think the Board of Education can come to us with a budget that includes a protective field cover if we need to. I also am not super looking forward to them having comments over the next couple of months that the Board of Aldermen just canceled graduation. So I do think we're going to have to come up with a strategy and a plan, and there's going to be room for conversation. And I would point out that that's where the Joint Special School Building Committee comes in. All of the aldermanic members are here and very invested in this conversation. So I think we probably, regardless of whether we put the word cover in the conversation or not, we're going to have that conversation at the Joint Special School Building Committee. And if there's a reasonable plan to put a cover forward and there's an incentive for us to do so, then we could do that. But there isn't any information or data to make that assessment right now, other than the only quote we have is for a cover is $400,000, and that would have been almost a third of the budget. So I don't necessarily think we have to remove the word cover in order to move forward with this. If we do remove the word cover, fine, I would support the ultimate amendment anyway, just because we're just going to see something come back in the school board's budget anyway. I think they can put that on us if they want to in their budget and say, look, we need this for certain things. We can't just move graduation. But they aren't here right now. They haven't considered the question. So I think at the very least, it's slightly safer to leave the idea of the cover in, just because maybe we'll find out something, versus removing it intentionally and then there's no opportunity.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of the current motion we have on the table here. And I do so because, quite honestly, I find it a little misleading if we were to leave it in there. If we were to leave it in the title and in the resolved, and then you go down and you look at the Stellar's cost and estimations that we just received, and you see nothing in there about a protective field cover. So for those reasons, I feel we should remove it from the title and the resolved area. Let's open up the aperture, let our department heads do what they do best, and come back to us, and we'll make a final decision when that time comes. Thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. I feel like I'm just kind of saying me too, which is kind of what I'm doing, me too. But I spoke earlier. I think I'm going to say the same thing. I support removing the words protective field cover. There was no justification in that. And I just feel like we're giving, to those that are going to say that we're adding to this without giving dollars to it. So for that reason, I will support the amendment. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
I don't mind the amendment and the thought, but I'm extremely concerned that this is going to drive it back to having to have another public hearing, and I can guarantee we won't have the field done this fall. I would rather leave it in and we eliminate it later, but let's get this legislation passed tonight so I can get started on the field. Otherwise, it's going to be in the spring, and you're going to affect a whole lot of people. So there's no sound reason for having to take the wording out now. There's nothing in there that says we have to buy it, especially if it's extremely expensive. We have a limited budget, 1.5 million, and I'm telling you, if we have to go back to another special hearing, special, it's gonna drive this way out, and the company's not gonna be able to do it this fall.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Madam President. Perhaps through you to the previous speaker or to Mr. Smith or Ms. Jingers, whoever may still be here, is there anything in the contract that we're prepared to sign upon passing this that indicates that we have to have a cover?
Ms. Jingris?
There is not anything in the contract that specifies the cover or the necessity of the cover, nor is the company that we're getting the turf from or installing the turf people who we would buy the cover from. It's completely separate.
So as the contract is written, there is no presumption of a cover at this time?
Correct.
Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, to further that point, I will say that, now, again, I'm not an attorney, but I've been on this board for a very long time, and what triggers a change in where you would have to do another public comment, I believe, again, this is my opinion, I'm not an attorney, we don't have the attorney here, but from what I understand, what triggers the change would be something very drastic. And from the presentation that was given tonight about what we are doing, it was very specifically stated that the cover is not a part of it. That's been a topic of discussion amongst, we're at the third meeting talking about it. So nowhere, even though it says it in the legislation, nowhere should the public have ever thought, if they had any interest in this at all, which some of them came out tonight and did, and probably there are a lot watching on TV, would they ever have thought, had they watched this, oh, there's going to be a cover. So I think that the motion is in order, and in particular, it's in order because it actually is more germane to what happened in the public conversation tonight at the public hearing. So I think we would be doing a disservice to the public if we didn't go forward with this.
Okay. Alderman Dowd?
Can you guarantee that it won't drive
No,
another?
I can't guarantee it.
Then the risk is far greater than the reward of taking the wording out. And we're risking all of the spring sports if we can't get this passed and get the work going. We're on a time crunch right now. We're hoping it doesn't snow early. I know if we do it now, we can get this done before the weather turns south, but, you know, once it gets that cold and snowing, and it'll push off till spring, and they can't do it until the weather's fine in the spring, and then, so there's no benefit to me to taking that wording out.
Alderman Dowd, I don't understand why the work is going to be slowed down if we don't put the cover in there.
Yeah.
Why is that going to affect the rest of the work?
Now, what I said was, if we have to have another, if it changes the legislation as such that we have to have another public hearing, it's 20 days notification, and then it has to go this whole process again.
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't agree, but that's okay. Alderman Govea?
I'm all set.
Alderwoman Timmons?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Let me get this perfectly clear in my mind. You're saying that if we don't pass it as is, then they cannot do the work. Is that correct?
If we change the legislation, and legal determines that, oh, we have to have another public hearing because the legislation changed, then it has to be re-noticed in the paper. We'll have to have another public hearing. We'll have to go through budget and and the full board again, and we can't do that in time to have it done this fall. So is it more important to take that wording out of the legislation when it's not even in the budget, or to get the field done for sure? You know, we can always take it out later, but I don't see why we need to go through the process of taking it out with the risk of delaying this project to next spring. And, you know, the time that the field would thaw and be able to do the work will be the time that the kids want to get on there and use the field. So, you know, I can't see the logic of why you want to take that wording out at this point. It doesn't make a difference.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you.
She said
Oh,
Kelly.
Did she say Kelly?
I said
I'm sorry.
Kelly.
Okay, I
You're
apologize.
Alderman Clee.
It's all good.
Oh, my
Some
goodness.
of the same letters.
Some of the same letters. That's it.
I'm going to support the Jetty motion. I think that there's been a lot of good conversation around this and especially germane conversation during the public hearing. If we're concerned that making changes based on things we heard in the public hearing are going to change our ability to do this, then we need to have a lawyer here. And the point of the public hearing is for us to hear them and be able to make amendments. So I will be supporting this.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam President. I hear what you're saying, Alderman Dowd, but the truth is we're taking something out and not putting something in to make it bigger. I think removing this small little thing, especially with the conversation we had, is not going to trigger a public hearing. I can't see that happening. And no, I can't guarantee it. I absolutely cannot guarantee it, but I think removing this tiny little thing, especially after we got that list of things, I'm more concerned with it staying in there than I am with removing it. I don't feel comfortable. I mean, I'm going to vote for this, but I don't feel comfortable with it sitting there looking at me when we talked about this over and over again, saying we have a list of items with 1.5 million and we have this thing sitting here. So I don't feel comfortable. I fear that the public is going to feel that we're not being transparent. And we've gone through this too much with the public. I want to be honest. I want to be transparent. This is not being transparent when we got a list of 1.5 million. So it needs to come out. And I do not believe that this is going to trigger another public hearing. Why would it? We're removing something, not adding to it. So, no, I support the amendment.
Alderman Clemmons?
I couldn't have said it better than Alderman Clee.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm not supporting the amendment. You think the public was mad if, when, kids can't use it now. Imagine if we find out we do have to do another public hearing, and if we do, they'll burn down this chamber probably, because that's just,
Then we'll have to meet at the
we're
stadium.
focusing on this cover way too much. It's not in the plan. I think we're just focusing on it way too much tonight. It's not gonna change the legislation, in my opinion.
Alderman Dowd?
Cover can easily be taken out the joint special when we don't have enough money to buy it. So it doesn't need to be taken out here. Our budget's 1.5 million. There's not enough money in the 1.5 million to do the cover. So the joint special is gonna say, no. So leave it to the joint special. If we do it tonight, we're putting it at risk. And we don't have a corporation counsel here this evening. Somebody wants to call them and ask them on the phone. It's a hell of a risk. And with all the public comment we've had about getting this job done, if this gets delayed to the spring, we'll never hear the end of it.
Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you. Yeah, I understand what Alderman Dowd is saying. I do. There is a risk. We run the risk of perhaps having to do this again. And I also understand what Alderman Jetty was trying to do with his, with his amendment as well. So, yeah, the risk is, do we have to do another public comment? Do we have to do another public hearing? I don't know the answer to that. So, here's the bottom line. The bottom line is Alderman Dowd is correct. We don't have enough money to do it in the project. Where it could come back in is if we don't take it out, it could come back in if the $200,000 is offset. We have authorized $1.5 million, and therefore there becomes $200,000 in that budget. And if the cover is significantly less, then we could get that if it came under the 1.5 million. It could be added to the project. So is there a potential there for that if we don't take out the cover language? Yes. So I wish Corporation Counsel was here. I wish we had an answer to the question that we have. But we really don't have time to, we have to make a decision. I guess, because I think at the end, even though I've said what I've said previously, I don't think that this is going to affect it. I'm probably gonna, I'm hearing what Alderman Tebow is saying, with the public being mad at us if we do screw this up. And I think that's a greater risk. So I'm gonna reluctantly not support the amendment at this point.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll tell you right now, if we find a cover for under 200,000 for rental or for buying, do it. So I just don't think the extra money we might get if we come in under budget is still gonna be enough to buy a cover. And to Alderman Dowd's point, you guys can get rid of it in the joint special pretty easily.
Can't change the legislation.
Alderman Dowd.
Say something about it.
The other opportunity we'd have to get rid of it is, we're gonna be getting legislation to accept the 200,000 from the Stellis family. At that time, if somebody makes a motion to take the 200,000 off of the $1.5 million, you can also make the motion at that point to not do the cover. So you could do it just as easily then, and not affect the timeline for getting the cover done. I'm anticipating the contract tomorrow. I want to sign it Thursday. That can't happen if legal decides, hey, we're not there. You got to go back. And I've had that happen too often. I'm not willing to take that risk, because it will go to spring.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. If what you said, Alderman Dowd, just happened, wouldn't we have to do a public hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, because it would be part of another piece of legislation. And that doesn't require, I don't
We're
think.
changing this one. You just
It's
said
gonna
we would
require a
change it.
public hearing for the 200,000. So it can come up at that point and be covered.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All set, Alderman Sullivan?
Sure, yep.
Alderwoman Timmons?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm still on the fence here, but I would like to hear from corporate, and I think we should call. I know it's late, but, you know, he's used to late hours, and just to ask that question, because I'm going to abstain, because I don't know.
You can't abstain if you're sitting here.
Okay.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Want to borrow my second?
I'm
And
sorry,
we
I didn't
cannot
hear what
get-
you said, Madam
She
President.
wants you to call, she wants to call Steve.
I heard what Alderman Timmons said. I didn't hear what the president said in response.
You can't abstain. if
You can't
you're sitting
abstain
here.
if you're sitting here. I mean,
Oh,
if you're
right.
present, you have to vote.
But what about her request that we call Corporation Counsel?
Well, if you want to take a vote on calling Corporation Counsel, I'm not going to be the one that calls him, but
He's just going to yell at us for 3 votes deep.
But we
Alderman
would have an
Clemens.
answer.
This is, we're getting, I mean, we're all tired. It's been a long night. And I understand that, you know, here's the bottom line. Alderman Dowd's correct. In the end, Alderman Dowd is correct, because we would be risking whether or not we would have to do another public hearing, and that would take another 20 days, and that would put us out. So, you know, the likelihood of that happening, I think, is very low, but there's a chance. Kind of like how there's a chance that there's life forms out there other than humans somewhere in the universe. There's a chance. So do we want to take
One
that
dog
chance
out there.
and then and say, no, that's not possible, and then have an alien land on Earth and have the public be mad at us? No. So I think ultimately we should just leave it the way it is. I'm going to vote no on the amendment, and let's move forward, because there's not enough money in this budget anyway to do the cover, and if there is enough money by the end, we can have another debate about that later on.
Was you move forward a request to move the question?
Move the question, please.
Okay. The motion before us is to remove the protective field cover.
move the
No, gotta move the
Actually, it's a
question.
motion to move the question.
He's moving the, we got to vote to move the question first.
Right, okay, let's move the question.
Late.
All those,
Point of order.
Alderman Jettie.
So by moving the question, by voting in favor of moving the question, would we be cutting off debate? And if an alderman had her hand up, waiting to be recognized, and you didn't catch it, she doesn't get to make her point. Is
That's
that-
what move the question it
Not
does.
move the
It
question.
limits debate,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
which we've had a lot of tonight on this. Okay. All those in favor of moving the question, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Division, all those in favor of moving the question? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It fails because we need 8. Okay. Do you have your hand up, Alderman Clee?
We have 13.
It passed.
14.
Yeah,
No, we have,
Oh,
we have 14, we got 7 and 7.
Yeah.
Oh.
Alderman Clee.
I just had a really quick question, and I'm sorry, otherwise I would have moved the question. It was just a real quick question. And it's to Alderman Dowd. To your point, and I think Alderman Sullivan was asking it, so if, when we get the 200,000, at that point, if we make an amendment to this, because the joint special cannot make an amendment to this. Only this board can make an amendment to this. If we make an amendment to this legislation, R24-104, and at that point, we remove the words protective field cover, as Alderman Jettie has mentioned. At that point, it will have already passed, we'll have already signed the contract, we'll already have committed these funds. Well, at that point, we have to have a public hearing again.
so the field itself and the drainage is a separate company. Has no impact on the.
That's not what I-
so,
that's
well,
not what
let
I
me
asked.
finish. So it won't impact the move ahead on the field. If we change this legislation to take that wording out, it would probably be driven by the fact that you made legislation to say the 200 from Stellus is going to go towards the field, but we're reducing it 1.5 by 200,000, so it stays $1.5 million. At that point, you could take the wording out. Will it require a public hearing? Yes. But you're only a public hearing on the change at that time in funding. It's not going to change the fact that we passed the $1.5 million tonight, and it gave the money the go-ahead to start the project.
Alderman Clee.
I'm sorry to be so, maybe it's just the lateness of the hour, but I am confused. So when we accept that 200,000, we will be accepting that 200,000. At that point, if someone makes a motion, when we accept that 200,000, will we be reducing this by 1.3? I'm sorry, 1.3 million.
It'll change it to 1.3 if you want to take the 200,000 which it's earmarked strictly for the field, so.
Right.
That's going to be used for the field, but if you want to take the money out of the project by saying, we're going to use the 200,000 for the field, we don't need the $1.5 million, we only need $1.3 million, and some of these other things won't be done, then you can
At
take
that
out
point, we
the-
can
You're
do,
going to be taking out things that aren't going to be done, which is the cover. The cover has never been in the estimate, but it was in the legislation in case they wanted to fund a cover somehow. And at the time, when they wanted to put the cover in, they thought it was a lot less money. And it wasn't until after the legislation was written that we found out it was going to be that much more expensive. So there are other opportunities to not do the cover. One's going to be, we don't have the money to do it. Even if we accepted the 200,000 and made it 1.7 million, still don't have the money to do the cover. And the joint special, is probably not going to want to spend that kind of money for a cover anyway. And if we don't find anything less expensive, it's a moot point.
but just to make,
I do not want to risk for the sake of all the kids that use that field, to not be able to finish this work this fall.
But to make it clear, the joint special cannot change this resolution.
No. it
Just to
can't-
make that clear.
It can't change the wording of the resolution. It can say we don't have the money to do the
Right.
cover.
But to make it clear, you can't take it out of there. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment.
Roll call.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien votes nay. Alderwoman Timmons.
No.
Alderman Warren is not here. Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes.
Alderman Cavea.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
No.
Alderman Sullivan.
No.
Alderman Clemmons.
No.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Theobald.
No.
Alderman Clay.
No.
Is that a no?
Yeah, it's a no.
Alderman Dowd.
No.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
8 noes. Fails.
Motion fails. 8 to 6. Okay,
6 to 6?
8 to 6.
Oh, 8 to
It
6.
fails. So the motion before us now is for final passage of Resolution 24-104. Further discussion on that motion? Would the clerk call the roll?
No, there's no roll call for this.
It says it.
It says it in the
Oh, it
legislation.
says it in the legislation. I'm sorry.
What's that?
Wrong glasses.
Right underneath cover.
It was in the legislation. Go ahead, roll call.
Okay, Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Timmons.
Yes.
Alderman Thibodeau.
This one, 8, 10.
Yes.
Alderman Cavea.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman
Yes.
Theobald, thank you, sir. Sorry. Long night. Alderman Clee.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderman Kelly.
Yes.
And Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
That's 14 yeas, 0 nays.
That motion carries, and Resolution 24-104 is declared duly adopted. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion that the October 28th, 2024 special meeting of the Board of Aldermen so be adjourned.
The motion is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, and we are adjourned at 9:50 PM. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Here you go, Rick.